Hello and welcome to Chrome Computing. In this video we'll be doing a Chromebook comparison against the Asus C434 Chromebook and the Asus C436 Chromebook. If you liked the video, please like below and subscribe to the channel for future videos. So let's get going. Asus C434 versus the C436 Chromebook comparison. First of all, it's the build quality. That's the first thing you'd look at when looking at buying a Chromebook. Everybody is concerned about the build quality. So let's have a look at the difference between the Asus C434 and the Asus C436. So weight-wise, the Asus C434 weighs 1.45 kilograms. That's 3.19 pounds. And the Asus C436 weighs 1.1 kilograms and that's 2.42 pounds. So obviously the Asus C436 is a lot lighter, which is important if you want to use a Chromebook on the move. Thickness, again, the Asus C436 is thinner at 13.7 millimeters compared to 15.7 millimeters. And the outer casing on both and the inner casing on both is aluminium, so they're both premium quality looking laptops. The width and diameter on both are roughly the same, so the only thing what really changes the build quality is the weight and the thickness. As far as how they actually look, if you look at them, the Asus C434 has slightly more curved edge to the lid, whereas the Asus C436 is a lot more pointed edges. I guess that makes it look a bit more professional looking, possibly. I don't know. I think it's all down to the individual, really. There's not much of a difference. They both look good. The main thing is the thickness and the weight. The Asus C436 wins there. So the overall build quality, the winner does go to the Asus C436 Chromebook. And the next one is performance. Now, performance is really important when buying a new laptop because you want it to perform. So let's have a quick look at that. So again, on the performance side, there's 3 different models available for each Chromebook. So the entry level for the C434 is an Intel M3 8th generation processor. And that's a 1.1 gigahertz dual core with a turbo 3.4 gigahertz and 4 megabyte of cache. And the C436, the base model, is an Intel i3 10th generation processor, so there's no M3 base model for the C436. And that's 2.1 gigahertz dual core with turbo 4.1 gigahertz and 6 megabyte of cache. So better clock speeds there, and also 2 megabyte extra cache. The cache is important because cache is used to when the processor needs to get information really quickly. So if it puts it in the cache, that information can be grabbed as quickly as possible, and that's really good for processes that are done regularly. So the higher your cache in memory size, the more information could be fit inside the cache, which just speeds up your Chromebook. So the second one is an Intel i5 for the C434, and it's 1.3 gigahertz dual core with a turbo 3.9 gigahertz and 4 megabyte of cache. And it's also an Intel i5 for the C436, but it's a 10th generation versus an 8th generation. It's got 6 megabyte cache versus 4 megabyte cache, and it's got faster speeds as well. 1.3 gigahertz versus 1.6 gigahertz, and then turbo 3.9 gigahertz versus 4.2 gigahertz. However, you'll also see another difference. Whereas the C434 is an Intel i5 dual core, the C436 is an Intel i5 quad core, so there's 4 cores processing. So the speeds, you can't look at the speed of 1.6 gigahertz for the Intel i5 C436 and the Intel i5 C434, look at 1.3 and say, oh, it's only 0.3 faster. It's not, because there's quad core, so there's double the amount of cores working, so it's going to be much faster. So the quad core will make a difference. And then when it comes to the Intel i7, it's an 8th generation again for the C436, 1.5 gigahertz with a turbo 4.2 and 4 megabyte cache. And Asus C436, it's an Intel i7 10th generation processor with a 1.8 gigahertz quad core again, turbo 4.9 and 8 megabyte of cache. And let's just have a look at what else we've got here. We've got RAM. So on the C434, there's 4 gigabyte of RAM up to 8 gigabyte of RAM, depending on which one you get. The Intel M3 will obviously come with 4 gigabyte, and the 8 gigabyte. I think the Intel i5 you can get some where they've got 4 gigabytes, some where they've got 8 gigabyte, depending on which retailer you're buying from. So you'd have to check on that. But the RAM would either be 4 gigabyte or 8 gigabyte. With the Asus C436, it would be 8 gigabyte minimum, so it's starting off at 8 gigabyte, which is really good to see. But then again, you can still use a Chromebook today with 4 gigabyte of RAM, so do bear that in mind as well. That goes up to 16 gigabyte on the C436. In terms of storage, the C434 is 32 gigabyte, 64 gigabyte, 128 gigabyte. Again, that will depend on the actual model that you go for. And the C436 is 128 gigabytes, 256 gigabyte and 512 gigabytes. But the difference is, again, that will depend on the model. The difference you'll see is that C434 uses eMMC and the C436 uses SSD, so that's a solid state drive. So that's much better type of hard disk. It's not even a hard disk, it's like a disk and a static disk and a static chip inside the computer. That's better than eMMC. It's faster, it's more reliable. eMMC works absolutely fine, but SSD is definitely nice to see, and you do only see that in higher spec Chromebooks. You'll see the difference between eMMC and SSD when it comes to messing about with large file sizes, so moving large file sizes around. You'll see the difference in speed. One other thing you'll see on this, if you have a look at the Asus C434, the best model you can get is an Intel i7 8th generation processor. If you have a look at the Asus C436, the base model, so the lowest spec model, is an Intel i3 10th generation processor, but the Intel i3 10th generation processor is actually faster than the Intel i7 8th generation processor. You can see the speeds, 1.5 gigahertz versus 2.1 gigahertz. Yes, the Intel i7 has 4.2 turbo, and that's slightly faster than the 4.1 on the Intel i3 C436, but the cache, 4 megabyte of cache compared to 6 megabyte of cache. So that's quite amazing to think that the 8th generation compared to the 10th generation, if you was looking at an Intel i7 thinking, oh, I'd definitely only buy an Intel i7, having a look at that, the Intel i3 10th generation is better than Intel i7 8th generation. And if you have a look on the internet, you'll see that's the case as well. It wins in speed performance all the time compared to that processor. So that's really interesting to see. And that will also then mean, bearing in mind that's still a dual core, the Intel i3, so that means the Intel i5 and Intel i7 for the C436 with the quad cores, they are going to be monsters when it comes to performance. Okay, so that's the performance, and I'm sure you're not surprised. The winner will be the Asus C436 Chromebook. Now on to the display. The display is obviously really important. Nobody would own a laptop that doesn't have a good display. When it comes to the display on both of these models, they're both very similar. There's not much between them, if I'm being honest with you. They both have a 14-inch screen, with a 16.9 aspect ratio, so that's widescreen aspect ratio. They both offer full HD of 1920 by 1080, and both have an IPS panel, but the panel on the C434 is slightly brighter than the C436. I don't think it's massively brighter, but it is brighter. And they've both got super thin bezels, and they're both touchscreen because they're both hybrid Chromebooks. So you can use these Chromebooks either as a laptop or a tablet, because you can turn the screen completely around and use it as a tablet as well. So the only real difference between them is that the C434 has a slightly brighter screen. That's the only real difference. So essentially they're both very similar when it comes to the display, but there's got to be one winner, and that is the C434 because it offers a slightly brighter screen. There we go. So the next one is connectivity. Again, this is important. So if we have a look at the connectivity between both of them. So for the Asus C434, it comes with USB Type-C, and it comes with 2 of those ports. And the Asus C436 comes with USB Type-C, and it also comes with 2 of them ports. USB Type-C is the best USB connection you can get at the moment. It's the new USB connection. So all new peripherals, well, not all new, but most new peripherals now use USB Type-C. If you've got older peripherals, like a hard disk with a USB Type-A, and you brought a Chromebook with just USB Type-C, you wouldn't be able to use it unless you bought an adapter. The adapters aren't expensive. I've got a couple somewhere, I can't line around. They're about £15, $15, and you plug them in the USB Type-C, and then it gives you a USB Type-A. But would you want that? Ideally, you'd want it inside the Chromebook. So let's have a look what they've got. USB Type-A. The C434 comes with 1 USB-A, and the C436 doesn't come with any USB-A. So it depends on how serious that is to you. Although personally speaking, I've got different Chromebooks, and I do struggle when I've got the one with just USB Type-C and I'm wanting to use older hardware. I have to go and get my adapter, and it's just a bit of a pain. I know sounds very lazy, but it is a pain. So it is nice when you've got both ports available. However, saying that, when it has just got USB Type-C, that can make the laptop thinner because the port is a lot thinner than what a USB Type-A is, and that's where you can see here that the C436 is a thinner Chromebook than the C434, and I would say that's most likely because of the fact that they don't have to consider a USB Type-A port. Okay, so let's have a look at next keyboards. Both keyboards are good, backlit as well on both. The C434 is got a key travel of 1.4mm, and the C436 has got key travel of 1.2mm. I wouldn't necessarily say the more key travel, the better the keyboard. I don't think it really works like that. Everybody's different how they type. What I can say is both Chromebooks have a great keyboard, so I wouldn't really worry about keyboard issues at all. 10-hour battery life on the C434, and the C436 is 12-hour battery life. Bearing in mind these are the recommended times from the manufacturer though, so I would say it's more like instead of 10 hours, 8 hours, instead of 12 hours, 10 hours. I always take a couple of hours off because they never get what they say they will. In relation to Wi-Fi 5, Bluetooth 4 for the Asus C434, and for the C436, Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5. Good to see Wi-Fi 6 because Wi-Fi 6 is the new Wi-Fi technology, and it's good for households with lots of Wi-Fi devices. So even if you're one person in the household, imagine all of the devices you've got in your house that are connected to Wi-Fi. Then if you're a family, imagine how many devices you've got in your house connected to Wi-Fi. So Wi-Fi 6, where it comes out of where it performs is if you've got lots of devices in the home, they all should get a good Wi-Fi connection. So that's important if you want to stream games on GeForce Now or Stadia to have a good Wi-Fi connection. Obviously you would need to have a Wi-Fi 6 router, but it's good to see that on the C436. Micro SD slot is available on both, so you can easily add storage at a later date with an SD card. Both got a headphone jack. The Asus C436 also comes with a fingerprint scanner. I use mine now and again on my Pixel Slate, not all the time, but with Google Web Authentication coming through, can't say it, coming through, what that is when you visit websites, instead of having to type in your password, if they change to this technology of Google Web Authentication, then you'll be able to either enter your PIN number, so you'd have to set up a PIN on your Chromebook, or use your fingerprint to log in. So that's a really good thing. So if that is used by a lot of websites going forward, sorry, I'm losing my voice. If that is used by a lot of websites going forward, that's a good advantage as well on the C436. So I think we can safely say on connectivity, although, don't get me wrong, the C434, it does have a USB Type-A, where the C436 doesn't, and I do like that, but it still doesn't win on the connectivity front. It is the C436. So the Chromebook comparison summary, let's have a look. So we've got the C434 versus the C436. Something we haven't mentioned, which is important, and this is to do with being either an 8th generation processor and a 10th generation processor, is the AUE date. And the AUE date on the C434 is June 2026, and on the C436 it's June 2028. So you've got an extra 2 years of updates. If you don't know what the AUE date is, it's the automatic update expiry date. That's what it stands for. So when you buy a Chromebook, they will get updates to the Chrome OS operating system. Some of them updates are for functionality, to add new functionality. For example, not too far off from where we are now, you'll be able to use a screen recorder on your Chromebook without having to use third-party software, because it would be built into the operating system. So that's a new functionality. You'll also get things where they're improving what's already available. They've realised that maybe the notifications don't work great, so they change that. All that happens when there's a Chrome OS update. But more importantly is that security updates are done when a Chrome OS update takes place, and that deals with any security flaws. So essentially, once your AUE date has come to June 2026 for the C434, for example, after that date, you will not necessarily get any more Chrome OS updates. You can still use your Chromebook, and I would argue it would still be safe for quite a few months after that, but would it be safe 2 years after that? It's very hard to really say at the moment. That is an important factor when buying a Chromebook. So if you want to get the most, obviously you're getting 2 years more updates out of the C436. There are talks about whether the AUE date will even exist in the future. The idea being that Chrome, the actual browser, will be separated from the operating system. So although you won't still receive Chrome OS updates, because the browser is separated, that would still receive security updates. That's not guaranteed that that's going to happen, but there is a lot of news out there to suggest that it may do. So you may not have to worry about AUE dates in the future, but at the moment we do, so that's something to bear in mind. And the Chromebook C434 won display winner. All of the other categories went to the C436. So the obvious winner here is the Asus C436. So that's it really. Things you've got to also bear in mind is the price. Now the Asus C436 is a lot more expensive than the C434. I would argue it's a tad too expensive, but then when you look at the specs, I guess it's worth it. It retails around £999, $999, whereas you can get a C434 around £520, $520. Obviously that's at this time of filming this video. If you're watching this video a year after it was filmed, you might have different bargains, so it's good to look around. So although the C436 does win in the comparison side of things, when it comes to the price, I would say at the standard retail price at the moment, it's a tad expensive. That's the only thing I would say, because although it comes with great specs, yes, the 10th generation processors look great and they're much better in performance compared to the 8th generation processor, and yes, it's got a solid state drive, which is really good to see. It's got a fingerprint scanner. At the price, there's other Chromebooks that offer more in relation to the display, so that's the only thing you need to bear in mind. So versus the C434, yes, the C436 wins. Would it win other Chromebooks for the price? Well, you'll have to wait and see when I do other Chromebook comparisons. So if you liked, please like below and subscribe to the channel for future videos, and thanks for watching.